The people of Pompeii believed they had all the time in the world. By the time they realized they were wrong, there was nowhere left to run. An ordinary morning would become one of history's deadliest disasters. Families would be separated forever. Entire neighborhoods would disappear beneath fire and ash. And within less than a single day, 2 thriving Roman cities would vanish so completely that future generations would question whether they had ever existed at all. What happened on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius wasn't a battle. It wasn't an invasion. It wasn't a plague. It was something far more terrifying. Because the enemy wasn't human. It was the earth itself. And nearly 2,000 years later, the evidence remains exactly where thousands of people took their final breath.
Preserving one of the most haunting crime scenes nature has ever created. Before we uncover how an entire civilization was erased in less than a day, take a moment to support the Dossier. If you enjoy deeply researched documentaries that uncover history's darkest stories, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another investigation. Watching over both cities stood a mountain. Its slopes were covered in forests. Its soil produced exceptional vineyards. Generations depended upon it for their livelihoods. Children grew up beneath its shadow. Farmers thanked it for rich harvests. Wine produced from its fertile hills became famous across the empire. No one looked at the mountain with fear. Why would they? As far as anyone remembered, it had always been there. Silent, peaceful, reliable. The Romans certainly understood volcanoes existed. They knew of distant mountains that occasionally spewed fire and smoke. But Vesuvius was different. It showed no signs of danger. Not in their lifetime, not in their parents' lifetime, not even in the stories passed down by earlier generations. Its violent past had disappeared from human memory. To everyone living nearby, it was simply another mountain, a generous one.
But sometimes the greatest danger is the one that has remained quiet for the longest time. Years before disaster struck, strange events had already begun unfolding. The first warning came with incredible force. The ground suddenly erupted into violent shaking. Buildings cracked, temples collapsed, water systems broke apart beneath the streets. Massive stone statues crashed to the ground. Across the region, frightened residents watched as familiar landmarks crumbled before their eyes. The earthquake devastated Pompeii. Many believed the city would never recover. Some families packed everything they owned and left forever. Others stayed. They rebuilt, stone by stone, street by street, home by home. Years passed. Construction continued almost everywhere. Fresh paint covered damaged walls. New temples replaced ruined ones. Scaffolding became part of the city's everyday scenery.
Slowly, confidence returned. The earthquake became nothing more than an unpleasant memory. The people never connected it to the mountain. How could they? Roman engineers understood architecture. They mastered roads, aqueducts, military strategy. But geology remained beyond their understanding. When the earth shook, they searched for answers among the gods instead of beneath their feet. They believed divine anger explained the destruction, not rising magma, not shifting pressure deep underground, not an awakening volcano. Nature had already delivered its first warning. It simply wasn't understood. As the years passed, smaller tremors continued. At first, each one caused alarm. People rushed outdoors. Neighbors checked on one another. conversations stopped. Then, something remarkable happened. Everyone adapted. The shaking became normal. A cup rattling across the table barely attracted attention. New cracks appearing in walls became routine repairs. Life continued uninterrupted. The extraordinary slowly became ordinary. It is one of humanity's oldest habits. When danger repeats often enough without immediate consequences, we stop fearing it. That would become one of Pompeii's greatest mistakes. Then came the days before everything ended. The changes were subtle, easy to dismiss, unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. Farmers noticed something strange about their wells. Water levels dropped unexpectedly. Some wells dried up altogether. Others produced water that tasted different, metallic, bitter, unpleasant. Across the countryside, an unfamiliar smell drifted through the air. Sulfur, sharp, unmistakable. It lingered near the mountain before spreading across nearby communities. Animals reacted before humans did. Sheep refused to graze. Dogs barked relentlessly through the night. Birds abandoned the skies above the region. Along the shoreline, fishermen hauled in empty nets. Others discovered dead fish floating near the surface. To many Romans, these were simply bad omens. Perhaps the gods demanded another sacrifice. Perhaps fortune had temporarily turned against them. Most expected life to return to normal within days. Few imagined these signs were connected. Even fewer imagined they were counting down to catastrophe. Across the bay, one man paid closer attention than most. His name was Pliny the Elder. He commanded the Roman fleet stationed nearby. But soldiers weren't his only concern. He possessed an endless fascination with understanding the natural world. He documented plants, animals, geography, astronomy, anything that might explain how nature truly worked. Reports of strange smells, dead wildlife, and unusual activity around Vesuvius immediately caught his attention. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Pliny searched for natural explanations rather than supernatural ones. His curiosity would soon place him on a collision course with history itself. At that exact moment, hidden beneath miles of solid rock, pressure continued building inside the mountain. For centuries, molten magma had searched for an escape. Now, the rock imprisoning it was beginning to fail. The people living below carried on with their ordinary lives. Merchants opened their stalls. Children played in courtyards. Bread baked inside hot ovens. Conversations filled busy streets. No one realized those ordinary moments were becoming their last. Because beneath the calm mountain, the countdown had already reached its final hours. Morning gradually gave way to afternoon. For a brief moment, everything still felt ordinary. Customers bargained over goods in the marketplace. Fresh loaves continued coming out of bakery ovens. Workers pushed heavy carts through narrow streets worn smooth by decades of constant traffic. Children laughed. Merchants argued over prices. Life moved forward exactly as it had the day before. Then, without warning, the mountain exploded. The sound was beyond anything the people of Pompeii had ever experienced. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a violent detonation that seemed to tear the sky apart. The blast echoed across the Bay of Naples. Windows shattered. Walls trembled. Roof tiles crashed into the streets. People stumbled as the ground lurched beneath their feet. Instinctively, thousands rushed outside. Then they looked up. Where the familiar summit of Vesuvius had stood only moments earlier, an enormous column of black ash, smoke, and shattered rock was rising into the heavens. Higher, higher, still higher.
It climbed so far into the sky that it resembled the trunk of a gigantic tree before spreading outward into an immense gray canopy. No one had ever witnessed anything like it. Some believed the gods had finally abandoned them. Others stood frozen, unable to understand what they were seeing. Across the bay, Pliny the Elder stepped outside and fixed his eyes on the strange cloud. Years later, his nephew would describe its unusual shape in remarkable detail. That eyewitness account would become one of history's greatest records of a volcanic eruption. Even today, scientists use it to describe eruptions of this extraordinary scale.
Back in Pompeii, confusion quickly gave way to fear. Shopkeepers abandoned their businesses. Coins remained scattered across market stalls. Food was left cooking over open fires. Public baths emptied within moments as frightened citizens rushed into streets filled with shouting neighbors. No one knew what to do. Should they stay? Should they flee? Or should they wait for instructions that would never come? Every passing minute made that decision more dangerous. Then, something began falling from the sky. At first, it seemed harmless. Tiny white stones drifted downward, almost gently.
They bounced across rooftops, rolled along the streets. Some people even picked them up with curiosity. They were warm, surprisingly light, almost beautiful. Few realized they were holding volcanic pumice. The mountain wasn't finished. It had only just begun. Within the next hour, the gentle fall became relentless. The white stones grew larger, heavier, hotter. They covered roads, courtyards, gardens, every rooftop. Walking became exhausting.
Each step sank into a growing blanket of volcanic debris. Families struggled simply to move through their own neighborhoods. Still, many refused to leave. Surely this strange storm would end soon. Surely the city had survived worse. Hadn't they already rebuilt after the devastating earthquake years earlier? Perhaps all they needed was patience. It was a fatal assumption. The wind that day carried the eruption directly toward Pompeii. Every minute added another layer of pumice, another layer of ash, another layer of weight pressing down upon thousands of homes. Only a few miles away, however, Herculaneum experienced something entirely different. Its skies remained strangely clear. Residents watched the enormous cloud rising above Vesuvius from a distance. Little ash reached their streets. The contrast was almost impossible to believe. While Pompeii struggled beneath falling debris, Herculaneum remained calm. Some residents even convinced themselves they had escaped the disaster altogether. Perhaps fortune had spared them. Perhaps the winds would continue protecting their city. Some packed valuables and quietly left anyway. Others stayed. Why abandon beautiful homes when the danger appeared to be somewhere else? Neither city understood what was truly happening. Pompeii believed the worst had already arrived.
Herculaneum believed the worst would never reach them. Both were wrong. As afternoon turned toward evening,
Conditions inside Pompeii deteriorated rapidly. The daylight began disappearing, not because the sun had set, but because the volcanic cloud had grown so enormous it blocked the sky itself. Darkness spread across the city hours before sunset. People lit oil lamps. Torches flickered through thick clouds of ash. Visibility shrank to only a few steps. Lightning flashed repeatedly inside the towering column above the volcano. Each burst briefly illuminated terrified faces before everything vanished into darkness once again. The city sounded different now. Instead of merchants calling to customers, there were cries for missing children. Instead of wagons rattling over stone roads, there were collapsing roofs. Instead of laughter, there was panic. Families faced impossible choices. Some gathered their most valuable possessions: gold coins, jewelry, small statues of household gods. Others abandoned everything they owned and focused only on escaping alive.
Many hesitated. That hesitation would cost them everything. Roman homes were built from thick stone walls. For generations, they had protected families from storms and earthquakes. Many believed remaining indoors offered the safest chance of survival. Outside, stones continued falling relentlessly. Inside, the walls still stood, at least for now. But the danger wasn't the walls. It was the roofs. Every minute, thousands upon thousands of pieces of pumice accumulated overhead. Each stone seemed insignificant by itself. Together, they became unimaginably heavy. Wooden beams began groaning under the growing pressure. Families heard strange cracking sounds above them. Some ignored them. Others prayed. Then, the first roof gave way. The collapse was sudden, violent. The entire structure crashed downward beneath the crushing weight. Within moments, another roof failed, then another. Soon the sounds echoed throughout Pompeii. Homes that had sheltered generations suddenly became deadly traps. People who believed they were safest inside found themselves buried beneath broken timber, shattered tiles, and an endless rain of volcanic debris. Those who survived the collapse often couldn't escape. Doors were blocked. Windows disappeared beneath mountains of pumice. Ash poured into every opening. Slowly, relentlessly, the city itself was becoming a prison. Far from Pompeii, Pliny the Elder made a decision few others would have dared. What had begun as scientific curiosity was now unmistakably a humanitarian disaster. Reports arrived describing frightened families trapped along the coastline. One desperate message reached him from a woman named Rectina. She pleaded for rescue. The roads were no longer safe. Escape by land had become impossible. Only the sea remained. Pliny wasted no time. Instead of preparing a single observation vessel, he ordered Roman warships into the bay. The mission had changed. This was no longer about studying nature. It was about saving lives. Experienced sailors warned him against it. Ash was already falling onto the water. Visibility continued worsening. Floating debris threatened every ship. The coastline itself appeared to be changing. Approaching the volcano meant sailing directly into the heart of the disaster. Pliny listened, then calmly gave the order to continue. According to the account preserved by his nephew, he spoke words that would survive for nearly 2,000 years. Fortune favors the bold. The fleet pushed forward. Toward darkness. Toward uncertainty.
toward one of history's greatest rescue attempts. None of them could possibly know. The volcano had not yet unleashed its deadliest weapon. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment saying, "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this incredible story. Ahead of them, the sea itself was beginning to change, and before sunrise, thousands more lives would be lost in a way no Roman had ever imagined possible.
As Pliny's fleet struggled toward the disaster, the mountain was entering a far more dangerous phase. Everything that had happened until now, the explosions, the falling stones, the darkness swallowing Pompeii, it was only the beginning. For hours, Vesuvius had hurled unimaginable amounts of ash, rock, and volcanic gas high into the atmosphere. The towering column seemed almost alive, stretching skyward with unstoppable force. But no eruption can sustain that kind of power forever. Eventually, gravity always wins. Deep inside the volcano, the pressure feeding the eruption began to weaken. The enormous column, once held upright by tremendous force, could no longer support its own weight. Slowly at first, then, all at once, it began to collapse.
In Pompeii, something unexpected happened. The relentless rain of pumice suddenly became lighter, then lighter still. For the first time in hours, silence returned. It wasn't complete silence. Distant cries still echoed through the buried streets. Timbers continued creaking beneath damaged buildings. Small fires burned in scattered homes. But compared to the chaos of the previous hours, it felt peaceful. For many survivors, it seemed like the nightmare was finally ending. Families cautiously emerged from whatever shelter had protected them. Some climbed through upper-story windows because their front doors had disappeared beneath piles of volcanic debris. Others stepped carefully across rooftops, searching for loved ones. Torchlight flickered through the darkness as frightened neighbors called each other's names. The city they knew had vanished. Entire streets were buried beneath thick layers of ash and pumice. Familiar landmarks had disappeared. Buildings leaned dangerously. Collapsed roofs blocked narrow passageways. Even experienced residents struggled to recognize their own neighborhoods. Still, hope returned. If the eruption was ending, perhaps there was still time to escape. Some people gathered what little they had left and started moving toward the city gates. Others chose to wait until sunrise, believing daylight would make evacuation easier. Neither decision would matter. Because the silence was not a sign of safety, it was the pause before the final blow. Far above them, millions of tons of superheated ash and volcanic gas were collapsing down the slopes of Vesuvius. Unlike the falling pumice that had buried Pompeii throughout the day, this new threat moved with terrifying speed. It did not drift, it raced. Scientists now call these deadly clouds pyroclastic flows. The name sounds clinical, almost harmless. The reality is anything but. Imagine a hurricane. Now imagine that hurricane made entirely of fire, poisonous gas, ash, and shattered rock. Imagine it moving faster than a speeding car, hot enough to ignite wood, powerful enough to flatten buildings, impossible to outrun. That was what rushed down the mountainside. And the first city standing in its path was Herculaneum. Only hours earlier, its residents had believed fortune was on their side. While Pompeii disappeared beneath falling stones, Herculaneum had remained relatively untouched. Many families stayed inside their beautiful homes. Others gathered along the shoreline, convinced rescue ships would soon arrive. Hundreds crowded beneath large stone boat shelters near the beach. The thick walls seemed like the safest place to wait. Some held children close. Others clutched bags of valuables. Many stared across the bay, hoping to see Roman ships appearing through the darkness.
They never did. Without warning, the pyroclastic flow struck. There was no loud countdown, no opportunity to run, no final chance to escape. The superheated cloud swept through the city almost instantly. The temperature rose with unimaginable speed. Wooden doors, furniture, roof beams, everything organic reacted to the intense heat. The people inside the boat shelters never had the opportunity to flee.
Death came within moments. Not through collapsing buildings, not through slow burial, but through an overwhelming blast of heat and toxic gases that left virtually no chance of survival. The city that had seemed safest only hours before disappeared in an instant. Layer upon layer of volcanic material rapidly sealed Herculaneum beneath the earth. What had been elegant villas overlooking the sea became a silent tomb, hidden, forgotten, preserved. Back in Pompeii, the danger was racing closer. Several waves of scorching gas and ash surged down the mountain. The first stopped short of the city. Survivors never knew how close death had come. Then another followed, and another, each pushing farther than the last. Finally, one reached the streets. The burning cloud swept through Pompeii with unstoppable force. Those still alive had nowhere left to hide.
The poisonous air entered homes, filled courtyards, raced through alleyways. One breath was enough. The scorching gases burned lungs almost instantly. Oxygen disappeared. Within moments, life across the city came to an end. Families were found exactly where they had spent their final seconds. Some remained together inside their homes. Others died while desperately trying to reach the city gates. Parents held children close. Friends clung to one another.
Some covered their faces instinctively. Others reached toward loved ones they could no longer save. Even animals became victims. One guard dog, still chained outside its owner's home, struggled desperately against its leash as ash buried everything around it. Its final moments would remain preserved for nearly 2,000 years. Volcanic ash continued settling over the silent city, hour after hour, day after day.
Eventually, it hardened into a protective shell around every victim. As centuries passed, bodies slowly decomposed. But something extraordinary remained behind. Each person left an empty space within the hardened ash, a perfect imprint of their final position, their last movement, their final attempt to survive. The world would not discover those haunting impressions for many centuries. And when it finally did, history would come face to face with the people of Pompeii once again. Not as names written in ancient records, but as individuals frozen forever in the exact moment their world came to an end. Across the bay, dawn was beginning to break. For the few who had escaped, nothing would ever look the same again. Because when the sunlight finally returned, it revealed a world that no longer resembled the one they had known the day before. When the ash finally settled,
The Bay of Naples had become unrecognizable. Pompeii was buried. Herculaneum had vanished beneath solid rock. The Roman Empire could conquer kingdoms, but it could not conquer nature. Survivors searched for loved ones and the lives they had lost. Most found nothing. Eventually, they walked away, leaving 2 cities to disappear beneath the earth. As centuries passed, nature erased the scars. Forests returned. Vineyards grew again. Slowly, Pompeii faded from memory. Until, nearly 17 centuries later, archaeologists uncovered an entire Roman city frozen in time. Homes, temples, shops, even bread still resting inside ovens. Then came the most haunting discovery of all. Using plaster, archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli revealed the final moments of Pompeii's victims. Parents shielding their children, families holding one another, a chained dog still fighting to escape. Not statues, not legends, but real people whose last moments were preserved by the volcano itself. Today, millions visit Pompeii every year. But the story isn't only about the past. Mount Vesuvius is still an active volcano, and millions of people still live in its shadow. Nearly 2,000 years later, the lesson remains the same. Civilizations can feel permanent until they aren't. If you had lived beneath Vesuvius after the earthquakes, would you have left everything behind? Or stayed, believing the danger had passed?
Tell us in the comments. And if you enjoy deeply researched documentaries like this one, subscribe to the Dossier and join us for our next investigation. Because history doesn't just tell us what happened. Sometimes it warns us about what could happen again.